Last year, Poppy Playtime announced they were releasing their all-new movie. However, over a year later, after tons of controversy and lots of mystery around the movie's creators, what happened to the Poppy Playtime movie and what updates have happened since, because there's actually been quite a few. Well, starting off at the very beginning, in late 2021, the developers and at the time YouTubers now known as Mob Entertainment would release the first chapter of Poppy Playtime, which was a really fun but also extremely primitive version of the game that we have today, with just 30 minutes of overall gameplay and only one antagonist, Huggy Wuggy. Now, Chapter 1 was obviously extremely popular, as we all know, with tons of YouTubers making videos and fan creations based on this little mini project, but it wasn't without controversy, as when the game first released to success, people were critical of its incredibly short runtime despite its $5 price tag. And this would be amplified even more when after this game's release, they would drop tons of merch, create figures, license out characters, make DLCs for other games, you name it, they already did it, which confused people since all we had was a 30-minute borderline test demo. However, this would be taken to the max degree when on April 27th of 2022, the developers would announce that Poppy Playtime was officially going to be getting a full-length movie. It still feels weird today. More specifically, the developers released an article with Deadline titled Poppy Playtime Mob Games Studio 71 Developing Horror Film Based on Video Game, announcing a partnership between Mob Entertainment and the media company Studio 71, who we touch on again later. And in this article, they go over the partnership in detail, saying Mob Games is partnering with Studio 71 to develop and produce a film based on its popular video game Poppy Playtime, one the company's hope will be a first in a horror franchise, with the CEO of Mob Games saying, "We are so excited to deliver the next chapter of our game and beyond excited to work with Studio 71 to transform Poppy into a feature film." And as for the actual contents of the movie, the developers seemed really ambitious about the project at this point already, with the article reading, Studio 71 is fast-tracking the project, and it's already out to filmmakers to create the story based in the Poppy Playtime universe. Mob Games and Studio 71 are also in early talks to bring aboard prolific producer Roy Lee, creator of the Lego Movie and It, which is big, but as we will talk about later, there might be some other people interested in creating the movie. Their vision for this game is a vivid tapestry that allows space for feature films that don't retreat on the narrative's gameplay. Fans of this franchise are in store for a new storyline that stands alone as its own terrifying and gripping saga. So the way that the film was set up, at least when it was first announced in this state, was that the movie was going to be based on the Poppy Playtime game and universe, so your poppies and huggies and whatnot. However, it was going to run on its own storyline. Perhaps it could be a sequel, prequel, or literally anything revolving around the game that even still to this day, with a second chapter and a spin-off, is still a pretty bare-bones story. So this article, at least in a vacuum, seems like a massive success with tons of plans for the movie, and the developers already getting a movie based on their game amidst the popularity of other video game movies like the Mario movie and the FNAF movie, of course. While most regular films are struggling in the box office, sounds like a great plan, but the people did not like this idea. Fans, and honestly mostly critics at the time, were quick to point out that this seemed like an overambitious and almost rushed decision made on an impulse to capitalize on the hype of this new IP and other movies like, of course, Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, it's common and good for indie developers like Bendy and FNAF to bring up ideas of movies and TV shows, but those were all based on full games, while this game even now is still a work of progress with 2 hours of gameplay total. Another major issue people pointed out with this movie announcement is the creators of the film Studio 71. See, Studio 71, going onto their website, is a media distribution company that has actually worked with Mob Games on their YouTube channels and tons of other YouTubers, with their brand being based around providing sponsorships to videos, copywriting music, managing social medias, and other things YouTubers or companies would need. But as for making movies, well, I did some research, and while the company is definitely not known for their movie creations, they've actually worked with a couple mildly successful films like VHS, an indie horror film that actually brought in decent box office numbers for his budget despite the less than stellar critical reception. However, other than that, most movies created by the studio are incredibly small, forgettable movies you've likely never heard of with no real success, which gave off some concerns at the time because unlike movies like FNAF, who have been in talks with DreamWorks and settled with Blumhouse Productions to create their film, this Poppy Playtime movie really has no plans or track record outside of one article where they said they'd like to get in contact with other people, but that's all. However, as we mentioned earlier, this was all a year and a half ago, and the question I'm sure we're all wondering is, whatever happened to this movie? Is it still in production? Was it canceled? And while minor, there's actually been a decent amount of updates regarding the film's progress. For starters, we actually got a mini showcase of the developers' animating abilities this past November when releasing their newest game, Project Playtime, as a spin-off, where with it, we actually got a full-blown cinematic trailer that matched the same quality as some fully animated movies with incredibly positive reception, showing they could actually be trial running some movie animation on their own. However, in terms of actual film updates, following this movie's announcement, while we don't know when it happened, it actually ended up getting listed on IMDb Pro named Poppy Playtime, and is listed as still in development. However, this page is vacant, and while I still think it's official, they list the movie as a short and a ton of random actors who aren't confirmed or anything, so I don't think the information on this page is accurate at all. However, despite this, the developers have came out and told us a few different things about the movie's upcoming release, whenever that is. As on their Discord server, they'd occasionally answer questions sporadically about the film, with somebody notably asking the developers if the movie was going to contain CGI or animated effects, specifically with Huggy Wuggy, or if it was going to use practical or physical objects such as animatronics or puppets inside of the film. To which the developers actually said that they were hoping to use a mix of both, which actually is a double answer because this also tells us that if the movie does end up releasing, it's actually planned to be in live action rather than being a fully animated film like what we saw in the cinematic trailer. And in terms of the movie's actual release, the developers were extremely vague about giving a release time for obvious reasons, since even to this day, I don't believe the movie has even been scripted out. However, they did tell us back when the film was announced that they were doing the announcement extremely early intentionally, most likely to build hype for the film early and to possibly promote the game's second chapter that released the next month, and we're not planning on actually releasing the film into several years in the future, with them also saying that by the time the movie ends up releasing, Poppy Playtime as a game might already be finished, but they weren't sure yet at the time. In fact, they even brought up some long shot goals for the film more recently, like them fantasizing in November about potentially buying a Super Bowl commercial for it once it ends up being complete, as a potential stretch goal years down the line if things all go well, which also confirms that in fact the movie hasn't been canceled despite their silence. However, while this is all they told us officially, there's also been some rumors going around about the movie possibly getting a new producer, as recently the producer of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, Jason Blum from Blumhouse, was just interviewed a week ago at this point, where he was asked about the very successful rollout of Five Nights at Freddy's, where he said, reflecting on it, "I think the right video games make great source material for movies. I mean, you saw that even with the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It's a different genre, but it was an amazingly successful movie. I'm definitely looking forward to finding more games that are popular and that we could turn into horror movies," hinting at the idea that Jason was scouting and looking for some brand new horror games that could be converted into a film format. And while some people brought up smaller indie titles like Bendy and the Ink Machine, a lot of people pointed out that Poppy Playtime is still in its movie's very early production. And with the FNAF movie coming to a close this October, it could genuinely be possible that Jason could be looking towards other movies such as this one in the potential future. However, as of right now, there doesn't seem to be any director for the film or any planning going on right now, and so now tons of people have been hoping, with Poppy Playtime even surpassing the popularity of FNAF sometimes and other games in question, maybe within the next year or so, with this movie being up in limbo, it could be picked up by Blumhouse themselves, which are a company literally known for creating classic horror films specifically on low budgets. So to me, this seems like a no-brainer. But while honestly, the Poppy Playtime movie is a controversial subject that I wouldn't even really say I'm a big fan of even to this day, the evolution of movie media and the game itself make the movie seem more and more like a possibility in the next couple years.